Welcome back to the Real Leadership Brief. I am your host, Donald Dunn. Today's guest is Limor Bergman-Gross. Limor is an experienced engineering leader who's been building high-performing teams and managing remote organizations since before remote was trendy. From confidence in performance management to navigating difficult workplace conversations and leveraging LinkedIn for personal branding, he brings real-world leadership insights that professionals at any level can apply immediately. Let's welcome Limor to the show.
I will fix that part where it said he. I did not.
That's okay.
That, but,
I love your. By the way, I love your intros, Donald.
Thank you. Thank you. I created this morning, so I was running a little bit behind, and I guess I screwed up, but that's all right. That's
fine. You did wonderful.
That's what shows everybody I'm human. I'm not AI. So why don't we dig into a little bit about what brought you into engineering and into leadership?
Okay, so those are two things, right? I mean, to engineering. Yep. I guess I was always drawn to math, to STEM related fields. When I was in high school, we didn't have really specialized like computer science program. I did a stint of programming in high school, like very much like a small experience. And, it seemed like a good fit for my skills, and also you make good money. So I figured, okay, I'll go and study computer science.
That is true. I think, out of all the engineering out there, I think computer science is probably where I'd want to be as well. I've worked with a lot of engineers, and they're a different breed.
Yeah, nowadays it's changing with AI. So, but back then it was like, wow, like a good path to have a good income. So. Yeah. I went and studied in university, and then I started working as a software engineer when I was still in university, like on my last year. And yeah, it was all good. I didn't really know what I will be in the future. I mean, that I'll be a leader. It just, started coding, and an interesting thing happened. I was not intentional about my career. And this is, by the way, something I do work with my clients, not to make the same mistakes I did. So I was not intentional about it. Naturally, like I was promoted like from a software engineer to a senior engineer to a staff engineer. And I remember that when I was promoted to a staff engineer, actually I was on a client trip, and I got a phone call from my manager at the time. And my manager told me, yeah, Limor, I'm happy to tell you you're promoted to a staff engineer. And, I was starting to ask myself, is it really what I want? Because that was like kind of at that level, you kind of, had to decide whether you want to grow as an IC, as an individual contributor, or you want to grow as a manager. And no one asked me that. I didn't even, tell anyone or ask myself. Yeah. So that was kind of, the thing that brought me into leadership, that moment. It took me several years, though, to get there after that. But that was the moment I realized I wanted to become a manager.
Yeah. I think that's something that a lot of people don't ask themselves. I think a lot of people just assume this is how the career path goes and this is what I'm supposed to do. And a lot of people don't take that time to really ask themselves, what path they want, not necessarily what the career path says you have to do, but what is it that you really want? And that shows the leadership skills that you already had at that point, to be able to stop yourself, ask yourself, and then lead yourself in the direction that you wanted to go, not necessarily what the path says you have to go. I came across a similar situation. When I was in the military, I had the opportunity to become a warrant officer, and more money, a better lifestyle, would have been a way better retirement. But I enjoyed leading troops and being with the soldiers and being right there with them, and being the part that is actually implementing training and teaching. And that goes away when you become a warrant officer. And so I chose to take the less money and stay where I was at and enjoy what it was that I was doing. But a lot of people don't ask themselves that. You're kind of in a niche field where with being like remote engineering, as far as the people working remotely, and I wanted to dive into a little bit of that because I haven't had a lot of people that have that experience on the show. Mm-hmm. How does leadership play a role with somebody who is working remotely?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, funny thing, I because you mentioned LinkedIn, right? I was doing work on LinkedIn to brand myself. Actually, since 2011, I never looked for a job again. Like, I moved to the US, found the first job. Since then, didn't look for any job. Mm-hmm. And, on my second job in the US, I was approached all the time. But I was approached on a company that was publishing a manager position, and on their career site it said New York. And I told them, I'm not based in New York. I lived in Colorado, so sorry, and I'm not able to relocate. And told me, no, you don't need to move anywhere. It's a remote job. And I said, are you kidding me? Like, managing remote? Is it even possible? Right? I mean, it was end of 2015. And I told myself, you know what? Sounds good, actually. It sounds good. I don't know if it's realistic. And I went on the interviewing process and so forth, started working, and I was skeptical. And to answer your question, I guess it really requires you to be very intentional about the people that you lead. Because up until that role, right, I used to come to an office every day. I used to see the people that I led and talk to them in the office, like whether it were in meetings or just coffee breaks, going to lunch, whatever. Mm-hmm. So I knew what's going on, and I could tell if someone was not happy or if something was going on. I could see that, right? I was there. And when you work remote, you don't see the people. So you have no idea what's going on. Yeah. You can see their PRs. You can see like the work they're doing, but you don't see all those things. And you have to be intentional about it. You have to make sure that you talk with people, that you ask them questions. Yeah. You probe them a little bit, right? You probe. And I won't forget, I had one engineer in particular. And you know how it is? I don't know if you know, but tech people don't like meetings and don't like one-on-ones usually.
Yeah.
And I had an engineer who kept canceling the one-on-ones with me. And he told me, why do we need that? Like, let's skip all the one-on-ones. I don't want that. I have a lot of work. I remember telling him, no, you have to meet with me, because if we don't meet, I have no idea what's going on with you. And even if we meet only for 5 minutes and say, hey, what's going on? All is good? Perfect. But we really have to keep those weekly check-ins so I know what's going on. Otherwise, I don't know.
Yeah. And I kind of wonder if that's kind of what he would like to have is to have you not know what's going on. but I can relate. I'm not a meeting person as well. I don't enjoy, sitting around an office and all the formalities that have to happen before you can just get to the business and move on with your day. Yeah. But I do understand the importance of it because especially remotely, I've seen these positions as well. I have been just as skeptical as you were, I even seen remote positions in the maintenance field. And I'm like, how is that even possible that I can be in charge of a project that's going on, and never step foot onto the ground of where the project's being done at. And it's just shows how much our world has changed. And with that requires our ability to lead and perform leadership skills differently as well. What are some of the big changes you see with leadership and how as the job market's changing, how leadership should evolve?
Yeah, and I'm just releasing an episode of my podcast tomorrow, which is about asking questions. And I think that as the world evolved, right, we have remote jobs, some of them hybrid. We have AI, right, doing a lot of things, right? A lot of people say, are we even going to have our job? But the thing that is missing is really the personal connection. And that's never going to go away. As long as there are humans and they have to do some work, we need to have human connection. And some skills that are really in need to develop are asking great questions, having empathy, curiosity, and reducing bias as much as possible. I think that leaders who have those skills are really good leaders.
Yeah. I would agree. That is, I never thought about it until just now, but you are right. The ability to be able to ask the right questions, not just questions, but the right questions, and navigate these conversations in a way that makes the other person feel comfortable and still gets you the information that you need to be able to make your decisions and perform your tasks is probably a talent that is hard to find. I remember sitting back and going through some of the interviewing processes that I had when I worked in corporate America, and I discovered that the human action part isn't as important anymore, because I would have interviews with people that I did virtually. They did amazing. I was ready to hire them on that spot. And then when they came in person for the second interview, they really struggled. And the only thing that changed was we went from a screen to sitting in the same room together. And it was those kind of skills that I noticed that people were struggling with. But when you put it in the context the way you just put it, as far as, talking in the remote atmosphere, I can see how a lot of people overlook the value that those candidates had when they were interviewing through the remote version. And I never thought about that until just now, about how they probably would really excel in remote positions, especially with leadership, because they were able to carry on these conversations and they were able to ask questions, not just answer them. And that all changed when it went into person. But I think that's a big part of the way, another element of how we've evolved and how the workforce has changed. Do you see that same thing when you're dealing with clients and helping them, that people kind of struggle more face to face and excel more remotely?
I don't know if I've seen something similar to what you're saying. So we kind of, when I started working remote, I kind of got into this skill. I don't know if you call it like a skill. I kind of harnessed this skill of being able to hire people without ever meeting them in person. And at the beginning, to be honest, Donald, I didn't do it. Like I was, as you said, like we were interviewing first remote, and then we had a headquarters in New York. As I said, it was in New York, the headquarters. We're bringing someone, we're flying people over to the New York office. Sometimes I flew as well to meet some of the team members so we can really assess if they're a fit. And we learned to do all of that remote, and being able to successfully interview someone, even if we haven't met them, and assess whether they're going to be a good fit or not. I'm not saying that they are 100% success rate, but we were able to assess. And that is all by asking good questions and really listening. Listening is another skill, like active listening to what the other person is saying, being curious and diving deeper. Those are skills that are really important. So I don't know if I even, if I face like people that struggled in person versus remote so much.
Yeah.
But I think it's more about assessing whether the person is a good fit or not.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the skills that I personally struggled in, was I could tell remotely if they had the skill set for the position, but I struggled with being able to assess whether they were the right fit for the company and the direction that we were going to. And I think a lot of that came from my lack of experience as far as dealing with remote versus in person. But it makes sense that this wasn't a candidate problem. This was a skill set that I needed to evolve on and work on personally, because I was not changing with the way the workforce was changing. And I think that's something that as leaders we need to be able to recognize is what personally do we need to grow on and evolve, and make sure that we are staying current with the way the current process is being done.
Yeah, and Donald, I don't know if this is a skill versus like being intentional, because we had an interview process, like we defined a process in place that the interview will include not just interviewing on the skills, right? Because usually I assume that when you interviewed, you assessed whether a person has the right qualifications to do the job that you were hiring them to do. But you didn't put focus on, okay, is this person really a fit? You used to do that naturally when you met people in person. You haven't thought about it intentionally. But when you're actually intentional about it and you have no choice, you have to hire people remote, then you have to put in the interview process, and at least one interview that assess that and ask intentional questions about a fit. So for example, it could be if it's very important for a team that, for example, we had like one saying about this, what was it like? Strong opinions weakly held. That was like a theme in our team. Like we want people with strong opinions. We want opinionated people, not just yes mans. But we don't want it to be too hung out on their opinions. We want to have a fruitful collaboration. So we were intentional about how we ask questions related to that. Like when someone disagrees with you, how did you handle it? Tell us about a situation where, you had a discussion, you were very passionate about a solution, and eventually a different option was chosen. How did you deal with that? So being intentional about those questions that you want to assess if this person is going to be a fit for your team. And you can identify that even without meeting them in person.
Yeah. I agree with you. And I'm just thinking back about some of the things I did, and I can tell just by our conversation now that I was making mistakes, and not knowing it. And again, this now falls back on the leadership of the company, because I wasn't the only person sitting in that interview process. There was more people on those calls than just me, and my own supervisors wasn't recognizing that I was struggling with that part. And so I wasn't getting any collaboration from my own people of saying, hey, when you interview, you do a great job asking these technical questions, but we need to also make sure that they're going to be the right fit, because if they're not happy, then it's going to cause us to not be happy. And we're going to end up starting this process all over again. And that never happened in the places that I worked. And I think that's part of that is because some people just are not taking that process as serious as it should be, because you really should be taking your time and finding that right fit, not just the skills, because I think the skills can be taught if they're a little bit weak, but they're the right fit. I think that's more important, and I think a lot of people overlook the importance of that side of it as well.
I absolutely agree with you 100%. I think that a lot of companies put too much emphasis on experience, like that you have super, super relevant experience to what you're hiring them to do, and like on the skills, and less about the fit, right? The cultural fit, the attitude, right? You want people that has a growth mindset, that are curious, that want to learn. When you have the basic, like you're an intelligent person, you can do the work. And I know that if I see people who moved and learned a lot of new things, so I know that they can learn. It's not about that. as long as they come with the right attitude and they are willing to learn, I can hire them. But so many companies are so focused on, we have to have those experiences, otherwise we cannot hire you.
Yeah. I would agree. And, just my own experience, that's exactly what I found as well. Let's dive into a little bit about practical leadership as a framework, right? Most people hate performance reviews, and I think, when you're doing them in person, there's one way to do it, and I've never had to do it remotely. So I'm really curious, when you're doing performance reviews remotely, how is that handled?
So first of all, I would admit here, Donald, that I hate performance reviews. Myself, I hate it. I always dreaded that time because it's a lot of load on the manager, right? Especially when you have a big team, and I hated it.
Yeah.
My take on that is the performance review should just verify what you already, or summarize what you already worked on throughout however the time was. If this is a year, to be honest, I think it should be more than once a year. It should be at least twice a year. Once a year is not frequent enough. So there should be no surprises. That's first of all. And in order for no surprises to be, you have to constantly, give feedback and discuss things as on the go. And the way we do it is, again, going back to what I said earlier about processes. It's really important when you work remote. So you have to have processes within the company of how do you conduct performance reviews. If you're using some tools for that, right? If you have different forms you need to fill. So we had a tool, I think it was Culture Amp. I'm sure that there are other tools within the company that we used. And we had a process. Okay, so a person would need to first fill their own self-assessment. So we have several questions for the self-assessment. They will have to ask for some peer feedback from people, not just people in their team, but also in other teams that they work with. Let's say I had a software engineer in my team. They will ask feedback from maybe an engineer in their team, an engineer in another team, and a product manager. Okay. So we wanted to get variety of feedback. Everyone had to do that. And they will also give feedback from me as their manager.
Okay.
Like kind of a 360.
Yep.
And when you have a process, it's very straightforward. I mean, it's annoying and it's time consuming, but you know what you need to do. Everyone understands how it works.
Right.
And that's what I had to do myself, right? I had to collect peer feedback and give feedback for my manager and do the self-assessment. And then when you meet with them on the actual performance review, you have everything in place. In the system, you have their self-review. So usually I would start with that, right? I want to hear from them first. I will be ready to assess if there are any gaps because I will read their self-assessment before I actually go to the performance review. So I already identified if there are gaps, right? Because sometimes people are not self-aware of different things. So I will be able to talk about those, to be ready to talk about those gaps. I will already see the peer feedback. So I will be thoughtful about how I want to communicate that, right? Without shaming anyone or mentioning names, more about like, how does this feedback could be good, right? It could be a good feedback, which will be also valuable, or could be something that they can think about.
Yeah, I agree 100%. One of the things that I did, because I do agree with you, it should be more than just, sitting down once a year. And too many things can get unnoticed. We as humans have a tendency to forget the good things and remember the last thing that happened. So if you end on a bad note and you didn't do any kind of counselings throughout the year, it is likely that your review is going to be negative because that's what you remember. So one of the things that I always did with my supervisors is I sat down between monthly and at least once every 2 months and did a counseling, right? Just kind of, this is what I've seen us do these last 30 to 60 days. And this is what I've seen you do and so forth. And I keep those. So that at the end of the year, I can go back and reread what was happening 10 months ago, 11 months ago. And a lot of times I realize, overall, this person did really well. Maybe we ended on a bad note these last 2 months for whatever reason, but that wasn't the majority. That was the minority. And I think like what you said, that's exactly what that does for you by doing at least some sort of counseling or semi-review or something. You have those notes to fall back on and give a more honest assessment.
Absolutely, yeah. Even we had a time that we did a quarterly one, but we had like maybe the quarterly will be less long, more superficial kind of review, and semi-annually and annually will be deeper. But I think frequent check-ins are important. And I always tell the women that I coach, if your manager doesn't initiate those discussions or the company doesn't, there's nothing that is holding you back from being proactive and scheduling those meetings.
Yeah. The feedback is important. And not just for your own notes, but if somebody's doing something wrong the first 2 months, why let them continue to do it? Until the end of the year when you do your review. That's just as much on the leader as it is on the person that you're mentoring or coaching. And I don't think a lot of people take that responsibility.
I agree. And Donald, unfortunately, most leaders don't give good feedback. They just don't know how to give feedback. This is another thing I work with leaders. They coach about how to give good feedback. What does good feedback look like and how to communicate it? Because this is an area where, and it happens a lot because leaders don't feel comfortable giving constructive feedback. So they just avoid it, or they walk around it and they just communicate it in an unclear way. So giving feedback is another skill. Going back to what we said about leadership skills, is another skill that is important to develop. Yeah.
And this is a good segue into my next questions. As leaders, not all the time is our interactions positive. Sometimes we have to deal with these hard situations, whether that be taking and doing a coaching moment where somebody made a mistake, or dealing with, friction between two subordinates, and you have to kind of interject because it's affecting the workflow. Remotely, how is that handled as well when you don't have that personal interaction anymore?
When you're remote, you're still having interaction, like we're interacting now, right? We have the technology. I'm not saying it's the same as in person, but it's the closest we can get.
Yeah.
And I think for giving feedback, you should be really removing as much as possible your own bias and opinions. Stick to the facts and constantly ask questions. I really like to use the SBI framework. I don't know if you heard about that.
I haven't.
SBI stands for situation, behavior, impact. In that meeting, so a situation could be in the meeting that we had, in the team meeting we had, behavior. I noticed you were cutting other people off in the middle of the sentence. The impact was that I noticed that people were uncomfortable talking.
Okay.
This is like very simple. Instead of saying, you're really rude in the meeting, you kept cutting off. It was very mean of you. So this is a bias from my side. And a lot of people do that, right? In engineering, it's very common, right? Engineers, very passionate. They cut people off. They don't let anyone else speak because they want their ideas to be heard. They don't do it from ill intentions, but still it can be hurting other people, hurting confidence and so forth. So this is something that comes up a lot. But how you say it is very important. You have to say it in a way that as much as possible is not biased and not judgmental. So the other person can really first hear the facts. Yeah. And then you have to ask them, what do you think? And ask them to you, what are their thoughts on this?
I really like that approach. I have never heard it before, but that SBI makes perfect sense. And then following it up with getting feedback back, I can only imagine a lot of times, especially in that example you gave, they may not even realize they're doing it.
Probably not.
And so when you approach it that way, you tell them the situation, you explain the behavior, you explain the impact. Now it forces the other person to analyze each one of those categories, determine whether they agree or disagree with it. And then at the end, you give them that ability to give you the feedback. And now the conversation can begin on the what was happening and how do we fix it, and it doesn't become personal. There's no biases in there, and you don't have to make a statement that tries to make it where your opinion is the fact, because we've already established what the situation was, the behavior was, and the impact was. That was done at the beginning.
Exactly. And I like what you said, how do we fix it? The we thing is kind of, it's not just you. It's not just your, I'm not blaming you. We're working on this together. Yeah. And that diffuse a lot of times objections.
Yeah, I agree. Your projects aren't the only thing that should be built around a team. The behavior should be all the whole team. There should be a full contribution from the whole team. Your successes should be with the whole team, and I think that goes back to what we talked about earlier with the right fit, the right mentality, and the right the right fit for how the company is going to grow. What is the moral compass of the company, and what do we hold to be important? And if it's not teamwork and contribution, then you're going to have a really hard time growing, because you're going to have a bunch of sections of individuals, and that becomes very challenging to handle.
Absolutely.
So I want to end with when you're working with clients, right, and you're helping them fix a few of the things like you've just done with me today. I have learned things that I was doing wrong before that until today I hadn't even thought about. I learned new techniques, like the SBI method that you just talked about, and we've been talking for 30 minutes. So I think it's obvious you're very good at what you're doing.
Oh, thank you.
How is it that when you start working with new clients, where do these conversations usually begin, so you can assess what needs to be done and why they're even coming to you in the begin with?
Yeah, so they come to me for multiple reasons. By the way, sometimes, and this is the hardest, sometimes they come to me not from their own choice. Their manager told me to. This is the hardest, right? And ask them, why are we here? And say, I don't know. My manager thought it will be a good idea. So that's usually a tough one. And we have to kind of figure out together, like, what they want to work on, or, a lot of times they come with, I need to improve. It could be different things. I need to improve my time management. I need to be more strategic. I need to give better feedback. I don't know where to grow next. They come from a starting point. And usually when we dive a little bit, we uncover different things that happens. When it can be in the first session, doesn't always happen, right? I mean, we uncover like what's going on.
Yeah. I could see the barriers that would begin with, because now it almost sounds like that first situation where when the manager told them you're going to go and talk with Miss Limor, there's already a barrier there, because it doesn't sound like that the manager has even done a good job explaining why that person needs to go. It's almost like they said, we're going to let her deal with that.
My approach is usually, Donald, it's not that I'm coming as like, I'm going to tell you what to do. You're doing it all wrong. Right. It is a partnership.
Yeah.
And I'm here to support you, and we'll work together on whatever you want to work on, right? On your own pace. So it's partnership. I'm not telling anyone. I'm not a teacher. There is no homework. I'm not telling you what to do. Sometimes I give them some suggestions and say, it's your choice.
Right. Yeah. And at the end of the day, it truly, truly is. I deal with that a lot when talking about healing topics. My forte is more mental health and stuff like that. And when you're trying to help somebody get the help they need, at the end of the day, it is their choice.
Absolutely.
I can't force you to do it. I can give you the information and I can even explain why it's going to help. But at the end of the day, I can't, put one leg in front of the other and make you walk in there and get the help that you need,
For
I think leadership is the same way. Somebody can sit down with you, and if they put up those walls and don't want to listen and they're doing because what they were told to do, nothing's going to change. It is up to them at the end of the day.
Yes. And you have to respect that. You have to respect their choice.
Yeah. Yep. I agree. Well, Ms. Limor, can you tell everybody where is it that they can find you and learn more about what you're doing and get some awesome techniques like I did today?
Definitely. So LinkedIn would probably be the best place to find me. And also, I want to invite our listeners here to check out my podcast, because a lot of the topics I talked about today with you, I also cover on my podcast, From a Woman to a Leader. It's on every podcasting platform.
Awesome. And we'll get the notes down there, or get the links down there in the notes, and make it super simple for everybody to find you and check out your podcast and learn some awesome stuff. And it's all about personal growth. That's how we succeed, is by understanding that every day we need to pick something and work on improving it and wash, rinse, repeat. That's really what it takes. So I hope all of you guys got something out of this. I know I did. I truly enjoy it. And I think, especially for my veteran family out there that is transitioning and learning the hard way, that leadership in the military and leadership in the civilian world is extremely different. And if you're not willing to change, you're going to struggle. And that's one of the things that we deal with that transition of trying to figure out our new identity in the workforce. And a lot of it starts with leadership and self-growth. And so shows like this and guests like Ms. Limor is perfect for you guys to pick up these tips, apply them, and succeed. So Ms. Limor, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your expertise. I had a great time. All of you guys, take care, be safe, and we will catch you next time.